Good morning, and thank you for joining our RAFV educational webinar. Webinars are a new benefit offered to you as part of your membership. This morning, Carol Weinert of the Contracts and Forms Committee will be covering updates recently made to the 6.1 contract. All are muted in listen-only mode. Please hold all questions till the end. After Carol's presentation, we will offer you a chance to ask a question via the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. We expect this webinar to last no longer than 45 minutes. A link to the recorded webinar will be posted on social media and our website within 24 hours. Should you experience any technical difficulties during this webinar, log off and log back in. You may call our office and speak with either Jennifer or Heather. If feedback is a problem, use only the call-in option and disable the audio on your computer. At this time, I'll pass it over to Carol.
Good morning. My task today is to talk to you about the changes to the residential real estate contract, which is currently called Multi-Board 6.1, and to talk to you a little bit about the history of those changes. Why did we do this? Why did we change a contract that seemed to be working fine for our members? In that vein, I'd like to give you a little background. As those of you who have been in the business from 2007 and beyond know, we went through a financial recession, and as an outgrowth of that, the government felt that some changes needed to be made to the loan origination process. They established the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, called the CFPB, to orchestrate or design those changes. And they've been working on this for a period of years, several years. Earlier in 2015, a group called the Multi-Board Committee met to structure changes that would fit these new regulations. This was originally designed to go into effect in August. And I sit on that multi-board committee, and we had changes ready at that time. They then pushed the timing off to October, and so here we were, October 3rd. The result of what we have here is we call TRID. That's really a process to supply more information, more complete information to the borrower earlier on in the transaction. You probably all have had a transaction where the buyer is on his way to the closing and he doesn't yet know what his cash to close figure is. The government, and frankly, everyone else in the transaction, felt this was not okay. And under these new rules, the borrower receives more complete information and he receives it earlier in the process. All of this, though, extends the timing. I'd like to tell you a little about the committee that orchestrated these changes. We had four real estate attorneys, the head of the Illinois Real Estate Lawyers Association, a member of the DuPage Bar Association, a member of the McHenry Bar Association, and the attorney for the Main Street Organization of Realtors. We also had a number of regional Realtor Association representatives. I represented the Realtor Association of the Fox Valley. In addition, we had two realtor members who are in the education field. That would be Lynn Madison and Chris Reed. And so all of these members offered input. We met in meetings that lasted a full day, once a month, for a number of months to formulate these changes. And when you look at the contract, it doesn't look like we've done much. We focused our efforts in these meetings to only change the things that were driven by the changes in the financial regulations. Therefore, if you look at the mortgage contingency paragraph, that's paragraph 8, at line 61, we now have language that says not later than, and there's a blank. And this is really important. If no date is inserted, the date shall be 21 days after the date of acceptance. So what happens here? Buyer shall provide written evidence from buyer's licensed lending institution confirming that buyer has provided to such lending institution an intent to proceed. That's a new term for us. And what that means is the buyer has made a commitment to a lender. Now, before that commitment is made, that lender is not ordering an appraisal, that lender is not verifying things, so they're in a holding pattern until the lender receives this intent to proceed from buyer. So the blank gives you the opportunity to fill in a date shorter than 21 days. And you want to be monitoring what your buyer is doing. If you put 21 days, if you leave it blank or you put 21 days thinking that's our suggestion, then what this does is it pushes out your closing date. 30-day closings, when you're dealing with a finance contingency, are no longer going to be an option. And how quickly you can close will depend on how closely you monitor what your buyer is doing and how diligent you are encouraging him to talk to his lender, see if they need anything. You still have, under this contract, just as you had before, the obligation for the buyer to make loan application within 5 business days. Okay? But then the lender generates their statement that itemizes all their costs. That statement, once it's generated, is good for 10 business days. If the borrower doesn't respond within 10 business days, the clock resets and a new 10 business day cycle starts. So you can see that it's going to be important to monitor. Right. The next part of this paragraph on line 68, it talks about not later than another blank, and this time it says it's 60 days. If you leave it blank, the buyer shall provide written evidence from the buyer's lending institution confirming that buyer has received a written mortgage commitment. This is what we used to call the clear to close. Right. Now think about this. If you left it blank or you've put in 60 days, once again, thinking that was our suggestion, from this date on line 68, lender needs 10 to 15 days before they can close. So you need to have a date, if we move to the next screen, for the closing that is at least 10 business days later than the date on line 68. In this vein, it's going to be important for realtors to get all of their figures to the buyer's lender as soon as possible. The buyer's lender now is going to do some of the calculations, many of the calculations that the title company did before. So you're going to need to get your commission statement to the buyer's lender. You're going to need to get a home warranty, if there is one, to the buyer's lender. And if there are closing cost credits or any of those items, that information needs to be in the hands of the buyer's lender when this document, when this final closing disclosure is prepared. Right. Now, so the lender prepares the closing disclosure, transmits it to the buyer. The buyer has a time to review it and then to accept it, and then the closing is scheduled. Right. So important to monitor. Now, if there are, you know how sometimes after a home inspection, it's determined that there's going to be a closing cost credit. The seller doesn't want to make repairs and the buyer wants things done. Right? That information needs to be transmitted to the buyer's lender as soon as possible. I can't stress how important these aspects are. Lenders are going to be very cautious with this. Failure to observe the guidelines on the part of the lenders results in fines, some of them as high as $1 million. So, you know, don't think you're going to slip something in at the last minute. It's not going to work. So be conscientious, be careful, monitor closely. In line with our changing only those provisions that affected the financing, we have 2 paragraphs now in the optional provisions of the contract when a buyer elects to pay cash. One of those paragraphs says he is in a position to pay cash, but he may choose to get a mortgage. That's paragraph 36, and you're looking at that on your screen now. And if you look at subparagraph B, line 439, we made a little change there. Remember, this is one where the buyer might get financing. The contract isn't contingent on his ability to do it, but he has reserved the right to do that. And so we've changed the language there a little bit, where it now says obtain financing. And previously it said obtain a commitment for financing. So just a cleanup in the language on that one. Change that we made, again, consistent with what else was happening here, had to do with the well and septic system inspection. On line 459, this is paragraph 38, we changed the number of days from 1 to 10. Now we changed that to 10 business days to make it consistent with what else was going on. It's consistent with the 10 days that the lender needs, the 10 business days that the lender needs to get the final document. On the final page of this contract, at line 530, we've added the state license numbers for both of the brokerage companies as well as both of the agents. We did that because that is information that the lender needs, and we felt that the easiest way to get that, to obtain that information, was the contract is written. So that was the rationale that went with that. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about what happens if you don't have the date sequence correct. Under the attorney review paragraph, there's a subparagraph D that the attorneys in the past have often, under their attorney review letter, deleted. That was a paragraph that allowed them to make suggested changes that didn't rise to the level of a counteroffer. We feel that they will use that provision to clean up any errors that we have made in the drafting of the contract. So you could be prepared for that a little bit. But I guess the thoughts that I would like you to carry away from this. You need to monitor the dates carefully. You need to explain to your client what has changed here. If they've bought a house in the past and they got a clear to close on Friday and closed on Tuesday, that's what they're used to. It's not going to be like that anymore. It can't be like that. The purpose of this presentation was to acquaint you with the terms of the contract, to help you to understand them. It's not to give legal advice. You know, we walk a fine line. It's our obligation to make sure our clients understand this contract, but we are not to interpret it for them. I can't stress enough the monitoring of the pace of the transaction. It is the expectation that lenders may want you to have the written consent of your buyer before they'll share information with you. So you may want to be prepared for that. This is just a new way of doing things. We'll work through this. It will be fine. It's just a process. I've covered the material that was assigned to me for today. I welcome the opportunity to explain the document to you. I would be available to answer questions if you have them, and I thank you for your attention and your interest today.
Thank you, Carol. At this time, if you have any questions, you may type them in the box at the bottom of your screen. You should see a box that says chat. Jennifer and I have both typed in there already, so maybe that'll draw your attention to it. It works just like an instant message, so just feel free to write your questions there, and I'll read them aloud to Carol. It looks like a couple of you are typing, so I'm going to just sit tight until we have something. Okay, Carol. All right, we are getting some. So okay. Robert Gorkowski would like to know, does this change the time of the appraisal process?
Yes, and that's a very good question. We have deleted from the contract the requirement that the appraisal be done within a given period of time. We can't control that anymore. It's going to be dictated by when the borrower returns or gives the intent, and I say gives because the indications are that that intent to proceed can be given verbally. But the lender isn't going to do anything, isn't going to collect any fees from that potential borrower until he gets that intent to proceed. And you know, the appraisal doesn't typically happen until the lender collects the fee. So it's going to slow down the process. And that's why you want to be monitoring what your client is doing. Have you accepted the loan offer? Have they collected any money from you at this time? These are the questions you want to be asking so you know what's going on.
Okay, thanks. Tara Ayers has a question. Are the realtors responsible for getting the home warranty and commission statement to both the attorney and the lender, or does the attorney send that information to the lender after we have sent it to them?
I'm going to say it depends, and I feel it depends on the attorney that you're working with. I would recommend you send to both the lender and the attorney. If you're doing it with an email, just copy the lender or the attorney on the email, and then you've touched both bases. You want to find out at the 11th hour that they didn't get that information, because once again, all those numbers need to be submitted 10 days before closing.
Okay, do we have any other questions? It looks like a couple of you are typing right now, so I'm going to sit tight to... Okay, and Tara said, thank you, Carol, and so did Robert.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Okay, so I think at this time, that's all the questions we had. If you do have a question that you didn't have a chance to get sent in, you can always email it over to me and I can pass it along. My email address is just heather@aria.com. So if there are no further questions, this will conclude today's presentation. I will take a link to this presentation and have it posted on our website and social media within the next day or so. So we thank you for your participation, and you can look forward to additional webinars from RAFV soon. Thank you.